Jerry from Slapdash Minis. It's been a while since I put up a video. Christmas kind of hurt. Here at the Game Chamber, gonna do a little video on making some basic War Machine terrain, but the same kind of thing can be used for any sort of fantasy terrain, whatnot. Today I'm just gonna go over a few materials and basic construction on how to build your shell, and then from there on we'll work on details and everything else. Alright, so material we'll be using today is foam core. All it really is thin layer of styrofoam, a little under a 1/4 inch thick with paper on either side. Probably one of the most useful things you'll ever find for making models. A little tip, don't go to Michael's or art stores to buy it at like $5 a sheet. Seems cheap, but you can get the exact same thing at the dollar store usually. $1 a sheet. I literally have about 30 of them stacked up in my house. And at $5 a sheet, that's a hell of a big difference. The way I always do it is I just lay all my walls out in a big row along the sheet, draw everything on there, windows, doors, everything that any major features that I want to put on, then cut it all out from there, and then I'll worry about roofs and floors beyond that. So we're going to start with just fairly basic village type building. So basically all I've done is laid out everything. I've got the basic size floor plan done. Remember what they say, measure twice, cut once. Here's me screwing up my measurements there. Added in all my windows, doors, anything big. Doesn't look like a lot right now, but once I start cutting, you'll see what it's turning into. Little tip, when you're marking anything out, anything that you're going to cut away and you're not going to use, mark it on the waste side, put a little X there. You think you're going to remember, but at some point, especially like an area like this, you're going to totally forget, cut on the wrong side, and then nothing will fit right, and you'll have to redo it, and you'll swear a lot. So that's that, and I can start cutting. For working with foam like this, that's the type of blade you really want. See if you can focus on there. These type of blades, because they're long and straight, they tend to do a straight line cut very, very well, especially through foam. And you're going to go through a lot of blade tips cutting through foam, a lot more than you think you will, so having it so you can snap them off instead of having to stop to replace it really saves a lot of time. And make your cut, line up your ruler, double check everything so you only get one shot at it, and make it in 2 or 3 passes. And then just start out by cutting out the outline of the whole thing. Alright, so there's the basic outline shape of your building done. Took me 5 minutes to get it cut out. Probably took me longer to draw it out. Next I'm going to go through and pop out all the windows. They can be a little bit trickier, still with your same knife, although I got to change the blade out. See, I've only done half a dozen cuts and I already got to change the blade tip. You can tell when it starts to snag along the bottom edge. And if you don't keep changing it out, it's going to start tearing the foam and it's just not going to work out very well for you. So for a 10-cent blade, it's worth just changing it. Then for your smaller windows and things, you want to use a smaller ruler. I think this one actually came from Games Workshop years ago. But you can find them just about anywhere. And trick, if you got windows that are on 2 different floors and they're supposed to line up with each other, cut the verticals at the same time along the same line, and that way they'll guarantee to line up as long as you measure properly. But hey, it's foam, it's cheap. And watch your fingers. Alright, so I got a couple of the windows cut out. It's just quick and simple like that. Just take your time. You know, you could save this for something, but whatever. And now I'm just gonna sit here and cut out the other half a dozen or so. Alright, so there's everything cut out, ready to go. All I gotta do is separate the actual wall pieces. It's much easier to leave it all in one piece until you're done with it. Keeps your windows lined up, keeps everything nice and square, keeps you from losing random pieces. So here's my main building. Front wall, this is actually gonna be sliced this way, but you'll see why in a couple minutes when I go to put it all together. Basic measurements I did for the building. I went with fairly small footprint. I'm going to be doing 3 or 4 buildings for a small little village anyway, so keep them relatively small. I went with 6 inches for the long walls, so that's the front, there's the back, and the 2 side walls are 4 inches. This little cutout is in here because you'll see why when I put it together. And as far as measuring for windows and such, easiest way to do that is to just have a model with you. So went with, I think that was 1 inch by 1 inch. Yeah, 1 inch by 1.5 inches for a doorway for war machine, seems to fit pretty good. Windows are 1 inch by 1/2 inch. I wanted some long and narrow ones for this. And other than that, it's basically just going by what looks right. So for now, I've just scribed, cut halfway through the foam on all the actual building corners. I'm going to separate them later, but this will at least show you what it should roughly look like when it's done. So just fold it all around. There's the basic shell of the first building for the Game Chamber's new war machine setup. And now I'll get all the parts separated. And the only reason I can do that without a ruler is because I prescribed the line, so if you pay attention, the knife will just follow right in the line you already cut. But if I mess it up, it'll be on camera. And again, more idiot-proofing things. I label which sides everything is I label the sides everything is as it comes off. So left, right, top floor, bottom floor, back wall's all one piece. Just, you wouldn't think so, but especially if you had your coffee, for people that actually drink it, because I don't, you'll get halfway through something and realize you put something on backwards, and then there are rage fits. And next I'm going to worry about actually putting everything together. And put it together, I'm going to be using, apparently it's a specific type of glue for foam. I got it from Michael's. It doesn't seem anything more to me than just somewhat tacky white glue. So regular old white glue works just fine. This stuff just dries pretty quick. And to hold it together while it's drying, good old paper clips. You can use paper clips, straight pins. More likely to stab yourself with a straight pin. Unless you're me, then you're more likely to send yourself to the hospital with a paper clip. Long story. Alright, now I could go through all the trouble of cutting like miter joints on the corners. Which would be cutting each corner to a 45 degrees so you only have paper kind of sitting there on the outside edge, but I'm not going to worry about it too much because I'm going to build up the corners on these with some wood, so I'm going to do everything as a fairly standard butt joint. Yeah, butt joint. One thing to pay attention with when you're putting together a building, especially if you're using a joint like that, make sure that you have the front wall and the back wall put on the same way. That way when you get to the end wall, it'll all line up, which it doesn't at the moment, but if you put this one attached like this, and this one attached onto the back, by the time you go put this one on, you'll have a huge gap there. Also, your roof won't fit, so just make sure you pay attention to which way you're doing it and make sure it's consistent. And now get some glue on here. I need a tall bottle. Little dab will do you, it doesn't take a lot. Make sure you got the right piece going in the right spot. It doesn't hurt you to double check. And to hold everything together, a little chunk of a paper clip. Just push it right through the foam. And while it's drying, take something square. I know I mentioned before to always have your combination square handy. I have no idea where mine went. I'm gonna question my wife about that later. So this is my miter box. It's a perfect 90. So set that there while the corner's going. And then another quick trick, when you just want to tack something in to hold it in place, a little bit of super glue. Make sure you're a little bit of super glue in the corner on the inside. Make sure you're bonding paper to paper because this stuff will eat through the foam really quick. And just inhale the lovely aroma. Here's your first corner. Again, I squared it all up exactly like the front wall. Back wall's even simpler. It's kind of floppy right now, but once I get the other walls in and a second floor in on here, that'll stiffen the whole thing up nicely. Be actually pretty strong. So I'll finish that up, and then I'll show you the slightly different thing for the top floor on the front wall. Alright, there's basic shell. As you can see, got quite a bit stiffer with the other wall on the end there. And before I add the front wall, which is going to go right in here like that, I'm going to add a second floor. I'm not planning on putting an interior in this building, but it will make the whole thing a heck of a lot stronger. So I just got to do a couple quick measurements, make sure I got everything good to go. It's a lot easier to do that before adding this wall than it is to do it after. So I'll grab me a big hunk of foam, measure a few things out. So I'm looking at 3 3/4. And always double check both sides, because you never know when your measurement might have been off. It's a lot easier to fix at this stage than it is later. And what I'm doing right here is I'm just measuring a line off because I need to remove one thickness of the foam. It's always a lot easier to, if you can, to measure off the piece you're using than to measure that and then transfer that onto a ruler and then transfer it back over here. It just compounds the margin for error. This is much, much more accurate. And I'm not going to cut all the way through on this. I'm going to cut all the way through the first paper and the second paper, but I'm going to, or second and the foam, but I'm going to leave the piece of paper on the bottom underneath. That way I can wrap it around and cover up any foam. That way none of the paint or glue that I use later is going to eat it. Could have done this for all the corners, but the other corners are going to be getting wood framing and such, so. And this knife blade's getting dull. And to do the bottom section, just very carefully. Helps use this finger as a guide. See, I moved it. That's why I went on the other side. There are special things you can get specifically for cutting this, which is known as a rabbit joint in foam, but for the 2 seconds of work it saves you, it's really not worth the money. There you go. Let me throw that at the camera guy. And here's your floor. And again, you're going to tack it in with a little bit of super glue to hold it in place while it dries. If I was doing an interior on this, I would be making sure that the floor was all sitting square and nice and level, but since I'm not, it's not a big deal. Alright, and since I cut that little lip out there, you notice that lines up flush with the outer walls. That gives me a nice, good glue surface to mount this with. Covers the foam underneath. There's a little showing over here, but it's not a biggie. It helps keep everything nice and strong and accurate. The more glue surface you can get, the stronger everything's going to be. So we'll glue that up. Alright, basic shell done. Really stiff because of that second floor. Fairly strong. We'll have to add a base to it to protect it later, but that is the absolute basics for pretty much any building you want to do for any sort of wargaming. Same technique works for Mordheim, works for Malifaux, works for War Machine, Warhammer Fantasy, anything you want. Warhammer 40k doesn't really matter. You won't be making villages, but I've got a great big defensive walls project we might show off in the next little bit. And because I measured, hopefully all my corners are nice and square, so that it won't look cockeyed when it's on the table. And that's everything for the main one. I think I'll cut a roof out and call it a day on this building. I got 3 or 4 more of them I got to do for the store, and next time we'll go over all the details. Work on putting shingles on the roof, window frames, although I think I'm going to make this village all boarded up and kind of derelict looking. Figure out something to do for doors and the bases. Alright, thanks for coming out.
Sit back. Okay.
I should do that because you keep putting that stuff in.
Yeah, well.
Stiffen up the butt joint. One thing.
Why is that so stupid funny?
Thanks for coming out.